In the world of K-pop, a single second can turn into 1,000 theories. And this time, the spotlight fell on two big names, BTS, specifically Park Jimin and Jungkook. An interview with Rolling Stone sparked a heated debate among fans. But the question is what we see truly reality, or just a figment of our own imagination? It all started with a casual conversation that was far from dramatic. In the interview, Jungkook gave honest responses about his vocal abilities, his development process, and how he viewed himself among the other members. However, small snippets of those answers were taken out of context and reassembled into a completely different narrative. Some fans began to read tension between words that were otherwise neutral. They observed facial expressions, pauses, even the direction of eye contact. It was as if every tiny detail were a secret clue. However, when viewed holistically, the conversation revealed something very human: humility and respect. Jungkook, known since his debut as the Golden Magne, has never hesitated to admit that he continues to learn from his youngs. And when Jimin's name comes up, his tone isn't one of competition, but rather admiration. An acknowledgement that might be too subtle to be noticed by those already looking for conflict. On the other hand, Jimin is no stranger to pressure. As a performer with high standards for himself, he often appears serious and focused. However, that seriousness is often misinterpreted as emotional distance. However, beneath that, there's a dedication that's precisely why he's so respected by the other members, including Jungkook. This phenomenon is nothing new in the world of fandom. When emotion and love are so intense, interpretations can run wild. Every interaction becomes a subject of analysis. Every silence is interpreted as meaningful. And in this case, Jimin and Jungkook's relationship becomes a canvas for various assumptions. But if we step back and consider their journey together, the picture becomes much clearer. They've grown together under incredible pressure. From trainees to the world stage, their relationship has been forged by time, hard work, and experiences that outsiders can't comprehend. These small moments, often referred to as Jikook moments, instead demonstrate a natural closeness. A light pat on the shoulder, a brief smile, or even a comfortable silence. These aren't signs of distance, but rather proof that they don't always need to be so explicit. One of the most touching examples occurred during a concert in Goyang. Amidst the roar of thousands of spectators, there was a quiet moment that was almost overlooked. Jimin and Jungkook stood side by side, wordless, yet with a seemingly in-sync energy. A connection that was uncontrived. There was no drama, no conflict, just two individuals who understood each other without the need for explanation. And that's precisely where the beauty lies. When fans try to frame their relationship as strained, they may forget that not all closeness needs to be obvious. Not all relationships need to be proven with words or grand gestures. Sometimes, the most obvious are the simplest. In the interview, Jungkook never put Jimin down. He never displayed a negative sense of competition. Instead, he spoke as someone who is still looking to grow, and that includes learning from those around him. Meanwhile, Jimin remained consistent, focused, professional, and dedicated. If there's a visible distance, it might simply be a difference in how they express themselves, not a sign of trouble. Public interpretation is often influenced by expectations. When one expects to see conflict, even silence can sound like an argument. But when viewed from a more neutral perspective, all the pieces come together to form a different story. A story about respect. A story about a friendship that doesn't need to be proven all the time. And a story about how two different individuals can still walk side by side without losing their individual identities. So, is there really tension between Jimin and Jungkook? Or are we just seeing what we want to see? Perhaps the answer lies not in the interviews themselves, but in how we interpret them. Because ultimately, it's not what they do that matters, it's how we choose to interpret them. But if we dig deeper, there's one thing many people often overlook. Group dynamics aren't always static. Relationships between members can change over time, not because of conflict, but because of growth. Jungkook, once known as the energetic Magne, has now evolved into a more reflective artist, while Park Jimin has matured in the way he carries himself on and off stage. These changes can sometimes seem like distance to those accustomed to the old version of their interactions. In reality, what's happening is evolution. They're no longer in the same place they were a few years ago, and that's perfectly normal. It would be strange if everything remained exactly the same after so much shared experience. In the context of the Rolling Stone interview, Jungkook's more serious tone could reflect maturity, not tension. He speaks as an individual who understands his position, his responsibilities, and his limitations. And in that process, the way he interacts with the other members also evolves. Jimin is no different. He's known for being emotional, yet incredibly professional. When the cameras are on, he knows when to focus. When he's behind the scenes, he knows when to be himself. Not all of those moments are visible to the public, and that's where misunderstandings often arise. Interestingly, many longtime fans see things differently. Those who have followed BTS's journey from the beginning tend to understand that the relationships between the members can't be judged by just one or two clips. They see a larger pattern, a broader context, and a history that can't be ignored. At the Goyang concert, for example, it wasn't just one moment that showed Jimin and Jungkook's closeness. There were many small interactions that, when put together, formed a consistent picture. A relationship not filled with drama, but rather a quiet stability. And perhaps therein lies the biggest difference in perspective. Some people look for the flashy, big emotions, extreme reactions, or open conflict. Others see value in the subtler things. In brief glances, in comfortable pauses, in wordless togetherness. We live in an era where a few seconds of video footage can shape the opinions of millions. But that footage can never tell the whole story. It's just a fragment, not the whole. And when that fragment is treated as complete fact, misunderstandings are inevitable. Ultimately, perhaps what we need to ask isn't, is there tension? But why are we so quick to assume there is tension? Because sometimes the answer to that question reveals more about how we see the world than about the relationship between Jimin and Jungkook itself. And as we continue to watch this narrative unfold, one pattern becomes increasingly clear. The bigger the group, the more room for overinterpretation. BTS's popularity means that every small gesture is magnified, every word is analyzed, and every interaction is debated as if it has a hidden meaning. In this situation, the relationship between Park Jimin and Jungkook serves as a mirror for public perception. Not because their relationship is troubled, but because they have had such strong chemistry from the start. When something strong seems even slightly different, people immediately assume something has changed drastically. However, small changes are often just part of the natural process. Not every day is filled with laughter. Not every moment needs to be overtly warm. There are days when someone is quieter, more focused, or simply lost in their own thoughts. And it doesn't always have to do with the people around them. If we go back to the Rolling Stone interview, there's a nuance of honesty that's rarely seen in other content. Jungkook speaks without excessive filter, revealing a side of himself that might be more serious. And in that honesty, there's no hint of conflict. There's just self-reflection. Meanwhile, Jimin remains present in his own way. He doesn't need to say much to make his presence known. His energy is palpable, even in the simplest moments. And perhaps that's precisely why many people try to fill the silence with their own assumptions. This phenomenon demonstrates how silence is often perceived as an empty space to be filled, but that's not always the case. In many strong relationships, silence is actually a sign of comfort. No words, no affirmation, just presence. On the Goyang stage, we see how these two individuals remain in the same rhythm. Not always physically side by side, but still energetically aligned. A synchronicity that's hard to fake. And perhaps, beneath all the theories and speculation, there's one simple reality that's often forgotten. They're human beings. Not characters in a story who must always live up to certain expectations. They have good days and bad days, hectic moments and quiet moments. When we start to see them as people, not symbols, all the apparent tension slowly loses its meaning. What remains are two people who have come a long way together, understanding each other in ways that can't always be explained, and perhaps don't need to be. If we follow the way these stories are constructed among fans, it becomes clear that many of these narratives aren't born from new facts, but rather from the repetition of the same perspectives. One clip is replayed, one expression is magnified, and then slowly transforms into seemingly irrefutable evidence. Yet, without the full context, they are merely fragments that lose their original meaning. In this regard, Jungkook often finds himself in the spotlight due to his evolving personality. He's no longer seen simply as the cheerful magne, but as an increasingly introspective artist. This change makes his expressions more unpredictable, and for some, that unpredictability fuels speculation. Meanwhile, Park Jimin maintains his characteristic emotional side, but with more mature control. He doesn't always show his reactions as openly as he used to, and this can make his interactions seem more calm. But that calm isn't distance, it's a new form of maturity. As two individuals develop in different ways, their interactions change accordingly. It's not that they've gotten worse, but that they've gotten more complex. And it's this complexity that audiences often simplify into something easily understood, though not always accurately. In the Rolling Stone interview, there are actually many moments that demonstrate mutual understanding. The way they listen to each other, the way they give each other space to talk, and the way they respond attentively. All of these are signs of a healthy relationship. However, because these moments aren't dramatic, they rarely become the main focus. What's often highlighted are the small details that can be twisted into something more sensational. This is a dynamic that occurs not only with BTS, but with many other public figures as well. At the Goyang concert, for example, there's a continuity that's hard to describe in words. They may not be interacting directly every second, but their presence still feels complementary. A harmony formed not by necessity, but by habits that have been built up over the years. And precisely because the relationship is so established, they no longer need to prove anything in front of the camera. There's no need to overly display closeness. What exists is strong enough to stand on its own, even without explanation. Ultimately, it all comes down to how we choose to see things. Do we want to find a loophole to argue about something that doesn't necessarily exist? Or do we choose to understand that not every relationship has to appear perfect to be real? Because sometimes, the most genuine are the most inconspicuous.